Welcome to Marriage Matters. My name is Rabbi Schonbuch. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist based in Brooklyn and around the world via Skype. We're continuing tonight in the psychology of positivity. And as a therapist, I want to discuss with you and share with you some of the real cases. Of course, we conceal the cases. You don't know who they are, but to understand how this works therapeutically in treating depression and anxiety. Just to mention, last week we mentioned this concept of building a positivity portfolio. And one of the people in the class actually built a positivity portfolio. And in the positivity portfolio, she shared different types of memories and things in her life which were important. And it's quite amazing. And I just wanted to ask you about your experience. So building this, was this a positive experience for you, right? It was a great experience. So the idea is that a person should build a positivity portfolio and put in all the positive memories, gratitude, times where they felt a sense of joy, times where they felt a sense of awe in the world, times where they sent a feeling of amusement. And to build this portfolio, you can make 10 folders, and each folder put all your memories and your thoughts and your pictures, and maybe you could refer to a video if you have a DVD or CD, put it into your folder. And what it means is that you look at that portfolio when you want to become happier in life. And it's such a tremendously, and I'm sure you'll share with us as time goes on, how powerful it is. If a person's mood is low, they just need to refer back to their positivity portfolio that they've built. And the great thing about the portfolio is you could build it day after day for a lifetime. You can keep on adding things that you have gratitude towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu for. That's a fantastic idea. Tonight we'll be discussing how to deepen our understanding of bringing the Torah into psychology, and some of the insights that our rabbis have had over the centuries that could also enrich the psychological experience. And I say this as a therapist, treating people really with depression and anxiety, with OCD and trauma. Some of the ideas which we're talking about are actually used therapeutically and can help people that are watching today as well. I mentioned last week also that a doctor of psychology at Harvard University, David Rossmarin, took the works of the Chovos Halvavos, the duties of the heart, the chapter on trust, and he took two sections of people. One section, let's say 10 people, he treated with the standard treatments of psychology, which is progressive muscle relaxation and cognitive behavioral therapy. And the other group, he had them study the book, The Duties of the Heart, the Chovos Halvavos. That book is a book about trust. It helps us understand that God is actually running the world, and that sometimes we have to let go of our own control of the world and understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is actually in charge of the universe. And they took this book, Chovos Halvavos, and they studied it for about 30 minutes a day for about a 2-week period. And they found remarkable results psychologically that help people overcome their anxiety more profoundly than the traditional ways which people treat anxiety, which are most of us as psychologists treat it today. What that tells us is that psychology over 100 years ago made a tremendous mistake by taking God out of therapy. Sigmund Freud believed that we had to remove God. God was a creation of man. Because of his weakness, he had to create some powerful figure. And the very description psychologically of the human mind is devoid of the soul. This is the very nature of modern psychology. If you open up a textbook of psychology, they talk about your cognitions, they talk about your subconscious mind, but they don't talk about your soul. So for over 100 years now, therapists have been taught not to talk about spirituality. But we see a study 100 years later in the most prestigious university, perhaps in the world, where a religious professor introduces spirituality into psychology, and we see tremendous transformation. We're going to see how we can apply other things in the world of the Torah, the Kabbalah, and Musar and Chassidut to see how it's really impactful in terms of psychology. And in my book, Think Good and I'll Be Good, on the chapter of how to become more happy in life, I suggest that people study a book called the Tomer Devorah. The Tomer Devorah was written by Rav Moshe Cordovero about 500 or 600 years ago in the holy city of Tzfat. He was the rabbi of the holy Ari HaKodesh, the Ari of Tzfat, who taught us the modern Kabbalah as we understand it today. And the Ramak was a great rabbi, a great posek, a great scholar, philosopher, and a great Kabbalist. But what was great about his work, more importantly, is he took the Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism, and he combined it with Musar. He combined it with our understanding of how to integrate it in our personal lives and our psychological lives as well. The book Tomer Devorah takes a stanza from the book of Micha, which has 13 lines in it, and it describes God from the highest perspective. It talks about God's mercy upon his creation, upon the world, and upon his creation of Am Yisrael. And more importantly than just talking about God's relationship with God, the Sefer begins to tell us that we should, Roy la'adam shidame lakono, that it's befitting for a person to emulate God in the world. This fits very nicely into our psychological principles which we've developed so far. First was creating space, and second was going above the world, looking at the world from hashgacha pratit, from the perspective of God's perspective. But the Tomer Devorah then suggests that we go one step further and actually emulate God in the world. We become more like God. And we're going to go through these 13 principles briefly, and then see how we can integrate them in the world of psychology and actually deal with the principles of physical pain as well today. So I'll just do this in English for tonight, but the first stanza of the Tomer Devorah is, who is a God like you? The prophet Micha was saying that God is considered to be the offended or insulted king at times, at every moment. What does that mean? We know that God is the source of life, and God gives us creation. Imagine you, this is how we feel about our children. There are creations. We give them education, we give them a place to live, we give them food, and one day they're chutzpahdik to us. They start rebelling against us. So the question we're faced with is, how do we relate to a creation that doesn't do what we want to do, what we want him or her to do? How do we deal with our children psychologically who don't necessarily follow what we want them to do? How do we deal with that? So the Tomer Devorah begins with a statement about God, that he is the offended or insulted king. He gives us actual life. But despite the fact that he gives us life, he doesn't hold back our life force from us. Just because we do an aver, just because we do something wrong, God does not destroy us. God does not cease to create the world or to sustain the world, so to speak, from existing. Just think about that on a psychological level. How if a person, when a person creates children, we get so angry. A person might think, I don't want these people to exist in my life. We want to get rid of people in our lives. But we have to learn from the Kadosh Baruch Hu that despite these feelings, that people don't do what we want, we still give them life. We are still beneficent to those around us psychologically. So the first practical lesson is to learn patience with people. Although our kindness and our patience may be unappreciated, we still have to continue to be kind. But from a philosophical perspective, the reason is, despite our conditions, we've talked about Viktor Frankl before, that asks us to have an attitude. Despite our environment, we can choose our attitude. Despite what is pulling us down in this world, we have to go on a psychological level to another level, the world of meaning, the world of godliness, to accomplish this. This cannot be done alone. We cannot simply, as human beings, turn towards psychology to believe that psychology has the answers for us, that we are alone can achieve what we have to do. We go to one level above. We become like God. We learn how God works in the world, and then we emanate God in the world. The second attribute is who pardons iniquity. God pardons things that we do wrong. So what does this mean? We know, according to the Kabbalah, that when a person does something wrong, an avera, he creates a negative malach, a negative angel. And when he does something right, or a negative entity, let's call it, when he does something right, he creates a positive entity. Well, who is responsible for these creations? So, nevertheless, it is God, even though that we create the negativity, that sustains both these things in the world. He's actually extremely patient with us as well, that he doesn't allow those forces to destroy us. We create these negative forces, this negative malach and this positive malach, but he doesn't destroy us through the agency of the negative malach. He still keeps us alive. And that could be psychologically the importance of being extremely patient. Even in the face of somebody that is making a lot of mistakes, we have to make space for them. We have to be kind for them. And we have to be patient with ourselves. We have to believe psychologically that even though things might not go the way we want them to go, we still maintain our kindness for others psychologically. This would be so helpful for people if they're dealing with family members that are difficult, with children that are giving pain, with in-laws, which are often a source of psychological distress in many people's lives, with children-in-law, learning how to be extremely patient with people. And again, psychologically, it's because we have this relationship with God. We be L'dame L'kona, we're being similar to godliness in the world. When we achieve that, we achieve the psychological benefits of it well. The next level is forgives the transgression. This is a high level of acceptance. In other words, don't just say that a person makes a mistake and I don't have to help them. It's not my problem. Just as God is kind and patient and proactive in the concern of our soul's journey, so we must too encourage compassion upon others, even though they don't deserve it or did it to themselves. You know, I'm sure you've had that feeling before. Somebody, they did it to themselves. You know, it's their problem, and now I can see it's their problem. Everybody sees their problem. We still engage with them. We still go out and help them if necessary. Next level, for the remainder of the inheritance. That means that a Kadosh Baruch Hu deals with us as he deals with something that he gave birth to, of us on a psychological level. It would be like we're giving to a relative or somebody that's kind to us. You can see psychologically that it's so powerful. The way we perceive people is how we deal with people. So let's say somebody's coming to collect tzedakah with us. You know, when they knock on the door, it's the 10th person, they knock on the door. How do we deal with them psychologically? Some people, unfortunately. Somebody bothering me, again, more tzedakah I don't have, you know. What if it was a friend of mine that I haven't seen in 15 years, he knocks on the door? How do we think about them? So we understand that the way we think about them helps us react to them differently. Imagine if that we see somebody that's hurting us as a relative, somebody that we could care for. And of course we know that Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh, every Jew is responsible for one another. So you understand that if we looked at people as a part of us, as being interconnected with people around us, we'd have a different relationship with them as well. And so on a psychological level, we have to practice seeing the good in other people, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu also sees the good in his family that he created. The next level, he does not maintain his anger forever. This is one of the core concepts of the Tomer Devorah. Even though somebody wrongs the Kadosh Baruch Hu, he gave us 613 mitzvot. How many errors do people do in the world? Willingly, not willingly. But despite the fact that people do things that are wrong, a Kadosh Baruch Hu maintains people for many, many generations. It asks us the question psychologically, are we able to give up on some of the things which make us angry? And how much better would we be if we practice not being angry against people? It's so incredibly powerful. There's a doctor named Dr. John Sarno. I don't know if you've heard of Sarno. People have talked about him for years, very famous. He's a professor of medicine at NYU, now currently retired. He's a professor of rehabilitative medicine at NYU for many years. He believed that the majority of physical pain people experience in their backs, as well as in their knees, in their necks, certain other conditions, are very much triggered by holding on to deep anger that we have towards other people. Very powerful anger that we have. He says that if you take an MRI of most people's backs, that you'd find all types of stressors in their back, all types of problems with their discs, all types of misalignment in the spine. But why is it that certain people experience much more back pain than others, he says? If you take their backs, we did MRIs on all of them, they have similar MRI problems. So people have slipped discs, and people have disintegration between their discs and the cushion between their discs, and so on, and the facet difficulties. So why is it that certain people experience more pain than others? He believes that a lot of pain we experience physiologically and I'm going to say emotionally as well, has to do with anger that we maintain for people. But this is not simple anger. This anger, he believes, goes way back into our earlier childhoods. It's a primal anger that we experience. I see the exact same thing with trauma when I treat people with trauma. I see that, I look at a person's personality as like an onion, that you have the core of the onion and you have these multiple layers over the onion. You don't see what's in the middle. Most people are like this. If you're in pain, if you're experiencing depression, if you're experiencing anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder, we walk around with much deeper pain that we experience early on in our lives. What Sarno says is, however, that the human mind cannot contain that pain for a long period of time. Let me just juxtapose two types of scenarios that people experience. Let's say one person, let's say you stub your toe one day and you miss your bus from work and your boss isn't happy with you. It happens, right? It happens all the time. What do? You go home, you unwind, you take a shower, eat something nice, you can watch something, talk to somebody nice on the phone, and you go to sleep. And the next day you wake up, you're okay, you're feeling better. That's a small experiment. But what if you've experienced something much more powerful than that? What if somebody punched you in the stomach, right? What if chas v'shalom you're abused as a child? Physically, sexually, emotionally, financially. We know now, according to most theories of post-traumatic stress, that one instance of sexual inappropriateness with a child, whether touching or exposing, can be detrimental to the rest of their lives. I'm not saying that everybody will be traumatized for the rest of their lives, but many people really are. And we see people as psychologists all the time with depression, anxiety, anger, disturbs relationships. But I believe, as the Sarno, that a lot of that has to do with a lot of repressed anger from previous traumas. And it's just so powerful. I'm just talking as a psychologist right now. I've talked about in previous lectures, for example, a child who is going through the twos. They can be called, oh, they're in the terrible twos, right? What do you call it? What if you call it the terrific twos? Changes our perception, right? So there are people who we call narcissists psychologically, right? When a narcissist comes into my room for treatment, it's really very difficult. Usually I see a narcissist, I'll take one, thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much. I'll see a narcissist come in. It could be a man or a woman. And that narcissist is cold, shut down, could be unemotional or highly emotional, but they don't have the ability to see the other person in their lives, no matter what you say to them. You could sit in therapy with a narcissist for 20 years, and they'll still be the same. I had somebody come to me today, she complained, that her husband, and I've known this family for a number of years, her husband only talks about himself. Totally self-absorbed. With the children, talks about himself at family gatherings. He's only interested in himself. And she asked me, is he going to change? Well, even before I got how to change a narcissist, I don't look at a narcissist as a narcissist. I look at a narcissist as a terribly damaged individual. And I can almost predict that most narcissists that come to me for therapy have suffered early childhood traumas, had neglectful parents, had abusive parents, had abusive experiences. You don't get to be a narcissist easily. It takes work to get to be a narcissist. But it's a lot of work from dysfunctional families that create narcissism. Understand where the narcissist comes from. If your environment as a child is highly invalidating, if you're constantly told you're bad, if you're neglected, abused, consistently, then that person ultimately starts shutting down from the world and just lives to protect themselves. That makes sense. If I hit you so much, you become defensive the rest of your life. And if you get hit by somebody as an adult, it can be painful and traumatizing. But if you're hit many times as a child, it becomes part of your personality. You can suffer trauma as an adult, but it doesn't become part of your personality. You are who you are, but you suffer from trauma. But if you God forbid, hurt a child at a young age consistently, or even once, but definitely consistently, over those formative years, let's say 0 to 6, 7, 8, 9, then you make the trauma part of their personality, where they will then close off from relating to other people around them. And the narcissist will get married eventually, but they will be ineffective in terms of giving love and empathy in that relationship. They will shut off from the other person, their emotions, their feelings, their closeness. But deep down inside, that narcissist has experienced a lot of pain and ultimately has a lot of anger. Another person came to me today, also a husband, just really shut down from his wife. And he could not understand why she's suffering when he's not friendly to her. He didn't understand what it meant. And that person experienced a lot of physical trauma. He was highly abused, physically, emotionally, slapped many times across the face. And there was a tremendous sense of anger in that person in front of me today. Thank God I had the training to understand where narcissism comes from, and ultimately how to help somebody with suffering, who has suffered post-traumatic stress and so on. But many people suffer with anger their whole lives and don't deal with it, and it becomes part of their personality. It's like, as adults, it'd be the outer layers of the onion. They're not friendly to you, or they're shut off to you. But really deep down inside, at the core, we're looking at somebody's wounded, somebody's terribly hurt. But Sarno comes along and says that that's just not just hurt, that is anger. Anger at a caregiver for being so abusive or so incredibly invalidating. That's the source of it. So with people that are shut down, we have to help them open up, but ultimately we have them get in touch with their anger. And that's what he says, by the way, is the source of a lot of back pain. He believes that people that have a lot of back pain have a lot of anger, and they have to find out where the anger is coming from. Who are they angry at? Who are they angry at? Who hurt them? Who disturbed their lives? Who held them back from doing what was important? Maybe it was life in general. Maybe a parent died when they were a child. Maybe something horrible happened to them. But they have to get in touch with that really powerful anger that they're experiencing and allow it to come to the conscious level. Sarno says that the reason people have back pain is the human being does not consciously want to experience pain for a long period of time. Who wants to suffer all day long? No one. When we suffer, we take an Advil. We want to get rid of the pain quick, correct? The same psychologically. When we're traumatized, when somebody hurts us and we're angry, the human being does not want to experience that anger. You just can't hold on to it. It's too overwhelming. So what do? We tend to repress our anger to the unconscious level so we can go on with our lives. But what's the problem is that anger still exists in our unconscious mind. We don't forget our memories, we repress our memories. We temporarily forget them. They could remain dormant. You could spend your whole life not getting in touch with them but be angry unconsciously. So Sarno believes what we have to do is help people get in touch with what they're angry about and allow themselves to experience it consciously. Because when we repress it into the unconscious mind, it's like energy. Those memories have a certain energy in the body, and they're not going to come out consciously because the conscious mind says, don't think about your anger. So the unconscious mind says, I'm angry, and the conscious mind says, don't experience your anger. So you're in conflict with yourself. You feel guilt. Don't be angry. Be angry. Don't be angry. So he says, since you repress it, it just pushes up in another direction. And your physiological system pushes up in back pain, in muscle tension. Kadosh Baruch Hu deals with his world mercifully. He doesn't punish, he doesn't exact punishment, mida keneged mida, every moment. It could be stretched out over generations. It could be in the next world, in Olam Haba. We don't know when that Hashgacha Pratis will come to be fulfilled. Yes, he does. He gives all of us time to heal. So we also have to give other people time to heal as well. It might not be in our the way we expect it at the moment, but we have to understand that just as God doesn't maintain his anger, we cannot maintain our anger on two levels, for others and towards ourselves as well. Because the implications are detrimental, holding on to anger. It raises blood pressure, it's bad for your heart, it wears down your body, it gets you into other situations, uncompromised situations that are destructive for yourself and people around you. It damages people around you. So, but when we medame lakona, when we emulate God on this level, on the fifth level, we realize that we cannot hold on to our anger. We have to let it go ultimately, at some level, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu does as well. The sixth level is for he delights in mercy. The Ramak writes that there is a select chamber, what he calls the chamber of, Kabbalah calls the chamber of kindness. And angels raise all kinds of acts performed in this world into that chamber. Whenever something bad happens to Klal Yisrael, whenever there's a judgment awakened against us, the angels in this chamber open up and show all the deeds that a person did for the other person. So what does that mean for us? Is that we need to look for the good points of others. We have to be kind to them, look for their goodness, which is the concept of think good will be good. We have to look in their goodness, because by focusing on his anger, on the kindness, the anger which we have towards them is lessened and we see the good. So it's so incredibly important, again, to show that kindness to people psychologically. So we will start feeling better about ourselves, and that will also elevate the other person that's with us to get to a higher level. 7th level, he will again have compassion upon us. What does that mean? It means that we have to forgive people. We have to have compassion. God actually considers it a merit to return to him and is now uplifted to a higher level than before the sin. Even though somebody does something wrong against us, we can't hold on to the grudge against us for hurting us. Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world, we say, according to the Kabbalah, with the letter Hey. If you look at the letter Hey, it says in Breshit, it says Bihi Baram, when God created the world. If you look at Rashi, it says Behei Baram, he created it with a Hey. Or Be'avraham, he created it through Avram, for the need of Avram. But the letter Hey, if you look at the letter Hey, it has two concentric curves, circles, half circles. And those lines represent an openness. So we have the Hey, or from your perspective, a Hey, and there'd be like a little line underneath that half circle. And that Hey exists to show us that God leaves space for us to come back. Even though we could fall down, we could come back again. That's why he created the world through Hey. We have to allow people to do tshuva around us. You can enter that small part. Hashem always keeps open that small little part on the top of the Hey for us to return into it again. So too, we have to allow people the opportunity to get close to us. I'd like you to think about the people that have hurt you in your life. I don't know who those relationships are. They could be family members. They could be former bosses, jobs you've worked in. It could be teachers that hurt you. It could be your spouse. I'm not sure who it is in your life. But I'd like you to think about opening up the possibility of forgiving them. Now, this is easier said than done. And the greater transgression they did, the greater opportunity you have to experience to be close to your Creator by doing this. You're doing this because, despite what you feel, you see this as a value. You're committed to a higher value psychologically, and you'll experience the benefits. All of us have experienced some type of pain in life. You cannot go through this world without being hurt by someone. But I'd like you to open your hearts and just give others a chance by forgiving them to see what happens. See what happens to you psychologically when you forgive. I mean, Sarna was saying, if you have back pain, you can get rid of your back pain. Again, I'm not saying that you should just, if an MRI says you have a slipped disc, you shouldn't go for surgery. Chas v'shalom. You have to go to the doctor, have to get a second opinion. But Sarno says at least try to see if what's holding you back is just a lot of repressed pain that you're holding on to psychologically as well. And for other people in life, look at how, if you're suffering and you can't find answers for your suffering, see if there's somebody in your life that hurt you, that is at the core of why you're suffering, and try to forgive, whether it's a community you want to forgive, or institutions you want to forgive, or schools you want to forgive, or the community synagogue you want to forgive. I'm not sure who that is. Try to see psychologically, and we'll do this at the end tonight to make a list. Try to see psychologically if forgiving relieves you from your deeper feelings of depression, anxiety. There's a great psychologist named William Glasser. I mentioned him before. If you want to get a great book on psychology, totally kosher, it's called Choice Theory. It was a book that inspired my career many years ago. He wrote a book and he says that William Glasser, Glasser. This is a fantastic book if you're a teacher, parent, coach, therapist, whatever you do in life. This is a fantastic. He believes that the greatest power which creates the most amount of suffering psychologically is control. So as we have to reduce control, and we know this from a fact, if we're living with a controlling person, how much we don't want to live with them. And how much, if we have controlling people in our lives, we want to get away from them, right? So we have to be careful that if we have to be able to reduce our control of people and situations. That does not mean that you give positive advice to people. That does not mean that you are using influence to change your children's lives or others around you. But we need to ultimately reduce control because the Kadosh Baruch Hu is in control. That is a tremendous lesson psychologically. Often people find out, I joke about this, I treat people with obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. I often call it obsessive control disorder. Because somebody that's doing repetitive behaviors like washing hands or checking doors or counting numbers over and over again or whatever they do, walking between cracks on the street, they're ultimately trying to control their environment psychologically. They're very repetitive behaviors called compulsions. If you watch a lot of children, you'll see developmentally, this is the trick for first-time parents. The oldest one, the Bechora, is always the guinea pig, right? The Bechora. We make all our mistakes on that one. Because half the weird and naughty things they do just go away, right? We don't deal with most of their problems with their kids, you know. Right. Parents, by the way, fixate. I've seen some parents. I'll give you a perfect example. This is my personal opinion, of course. Don't make your Friday night dinner, your Shabbat meal, unpleasant by demanding pure obedience at the Shabbat table. I know there's a machloket in different people's homes. Does everybody have to stand silently, be at the table perfectly during the entire meal? Some people do believe yes. Many parents that have come to me for help spend a lot of time fighting with their children at the Friday night meal. I understand why. It's the special time of the week. It's the one time you're together. Well, it's Shabbat day also. It's the first time you're together in a week. It's the Kiddush. It's the Malachim are there. But there's a balance between demanding that from people, especially children that can't handle it. I'd rather you come up with a positive reinforcer for Shabbat meals. So with my kids, for example, I try to buy them a special nosh, like must gum, because it doesn't cause cavities. And during the meal, I'll throw pieces of gum at them. Little cute little things I'll do. Say, oh, you sat so nicely, reinforce it. You washed your hands and you didn't talk, very nice. I'd rather parents do that. You'll see within seconds changes in behavior. Remarkable change. But those who try to control that environment, how do the kids feel? You know, I can't have a mood. Maybe I can't stand up all the time. Maybe I feel bad. The parents that try to control and control and control and control often have children that do the exact opposite of what they want. You have to become flexible. You have to be like a Kadosh Baruch Hu that shows some flexibility. Despite our sins, like in number 8, He will suppress our iniquities. God always favors the mitzvot, the positive deeds, over the negative deeds. It does not mean that the negative does not exist. It still exists. It's just that the mitzvot are higher. He allows them to rise above. That means for us psychologically to not focus on everyone's negative behaviors and actions, but pick out and remember the good points in that person as well. This is extremely powerful. Even people that have suffered from trauma and abuse, there may have been good things in their childhood they can hold on to and remember, the people who were kind to them. Is the difference between people who suffered trauma who recovered and didn't recover? Answer is decision. I decide to be this way or that way, despite my genetics and despite my environment. That is the difference. Of course, there are people that are born with different skills, genetic skills, despite their environments that are difficult. They're very smart, they're very physically able, they can overcome it, use that because society respects these qualities and they can use those things to achieve things in life. But it's all about decision. Decision is I decide that I want to be this way or I decide that I want to be that way. This is, by the way, what I talk to a lot of clients who suffer from prolonged depression is I work with them to make their decision, to choose. Of course, if somebody's terribly, terribly depressed, they can't get out of bed, they need medication, they need a lot of help. But there's a gray area between bed depression and just feeling blue. There's an area in between where a person needs to decide, how do I want to become? What do I choose to do with my life? It's choosing one's attitude, which is ultimately. And this, again, the Tomer Devorah is asking us to choose an attitude which benefits us. We're not being asked to become like our Creator because it doesn't benefit us. We're asking to become like our Creator because Hashem believes it will be benefiting us deeply, psychologically as well, to be able to function better as human beings. Number 9, and you will cast into the sea all of their sins. It's so important, you know, this concept of tashlich, we throw away our sins, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu allows us to. We have to be able to have compassion upon people, and despite the fact they may hurt us, to throw their sins away. Those sins may have been a communication from the Kadosh Baruch Hu. They may have been a communication for us to tell us something, to change our ways. Kadosh Baruch Hu is behind everything that happens in the world. The problem is we don't always recognize it. Even things which bother us are there for a purpose. But to blame the person is incorrect. We have to be able to oversee, to see beyond them, and to cast things away. Just as we do tashlich with our own averas, throw your neighbor's averas away too. Do some tashlich with them. Just briefly, the last few, you will show truth to Yaakov. Truth is relating to a person straight, in a straight way. Yaakov, Yisrael, is the word yashar kel, direct. Meaning, as long as we try, God reciprocates and assists us by giving us His truth and with the hope of us living a higher existence, to be straight. This means that we could give of our time to other people by helping them achieve their goals. Mentor somebody else who could use your life wisdom and experience. That's you'll show truth unto Yaakov. Help other people see a higher level of truth without anger. Number 11, kindness to Avram. This refers to people who act in abundant kindness to others. To this, God reciprocates exceedingly by giving them abundant kindness as well. So if you look at that psychologically, don't look for a gain for your kindness from other people. Understand that you benefit from it. Just as you act with exceeding kindness, Kadosh Baruch Hu relates to you with exceeding kindness as well. It means being proactive with people, attentive, patient, respectful. See if you can be of service to other people. This is so powerful. I've seen this psychologically with people for years. There's something in psychology called countertransference, if you're familiar with the concept. When a client comes to see you as a therapist, they transfer their feelings onto you, you transfer their feelings onto them. Transference would be they walk into your office and they see you like their father. They relate to you as they relate to their father. Or they relate to you as they relate to your mother, if it's a woman therapist, or vice versa, right? It's tricky, that's why they could like you or dislike you. Nothing to do with you, but they may have a transference towards you. We also have a transference towards our clients. It's called countertransference. In fact, when you do supervision as psychologists in college and master's programs and in clinics, we mostly do not talk about the clients. We talk about ourselves. How did you relate to that client? How did she make you feel? People can trigger bad memories. People can trigger very good things. And you're going to give them service differently based upon your countertransference to them. I know that certain people walk into my office, I will find very annoying very quickly. They're usually abusive people. They're very unfriendly. And I can see they're being mean if I'm doing marriage therapy to their clients, to their spouse. And I have to watch that temptation not to like them. And I've done this many times. I watch myself, what am I feeling towards my client right now? I don't feel this most of the time. Most of my clients are very nice people. But some of the people, like the narcissists or whatever, the abusers, one would have a tendency to get very angry at them and dismiss them out of the office. But they're not paying me or coming to me for me to be angry at them, because that's not going to help them. They want me to help them. So I have to arouse a certain compassion. I'm telling you an honest thing I do. I arouse a certain compassion in them. I look at them as I mentioned earlier, as somebody who's hurt. I'm here to help them get unhurt, to help them through their pain. If I look at them as evil, I don't have a chance of helping that person. If I look at them as being damaged, I do have a chance of helping them. So we have to arouse that positive attitude towards people around us. That's kindness to Avram. If you tell somebody they're doing an avera and they don't listen to you, so does it really help them by telling them? Let's just on a psychological level, with children, right? Our children know what we want. So why do we say it over and over again and start fighting with them? Really, we don't have to most of the time, okay? I don't believe that you could try to tell somebody doing something wrong. Usually it's pretty obvious. Unless they haven't learned halacha, they don't know anything. Most people know it's right or wrong. Kids know it's wrong to text on Shabbat, they know. They understand that you can't turn a light on and off or eat something not kosher. So if I tell them that it's wrong and they keep on doing it, I haven't done anything. So it's always the question of, I want to accomplish positive goals. I want to see growth. So how do I get to that level of growth with somebody? So I don't believe controlling them directly is often helpful. It doesn't usually work, unless you have examples where it does work. But that doesn't mean I cannot tell them once it's wrong, because they know that I probably feel it's wrong. The question is, what is my overall attitude towards that person which keeps up the relationship that I can help them change? That's what I'm interested in. I don't believe that a teenager at risk, I've never met a teenager at risk, and I wrote a book about this years ago, right? That rebelled from kite for philosophical reasons. That because he believes in evolution. I studied evolution, and I came to the conclusion that man was not created by God. I've never met a person ever that said that to me, ever. Because what I usually find is they had learning disabilities, or they were abused, or they were invalidated by their families, or usually a psychological reason behind what they were experiencing. So to me to tell a kid at risk, you must keep Shabbat, so it's not going to work. I have to draw them with love towards some. I have to deepen my relationship with that person through kindness, and then influence them to change. So it doesn't work through direct control, it kind of works through influence. Influence needs a relationship to be built. And that starts with my attitude is, do I deal with them kindly, despite their behaviors? Which you swore to your forefathers. What about the individuals that have no merits? I can't find a good thing in them. There's one thing they have. They're part of Am Yisrael. The very fact that we had forefathers, Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and the Imahos, and they are the inheritance of these great individuals and part of Klal Yisrael, that itself is a merit which we have to have compassion upon, as a Kadosh Baruch Hu has compassion upon all Jews despite their condition. And finally, from the days of old, even if the merits of our forefathers would run out, there are still good things that exist in history. The innocence of their childhood. In the merit of the past good deeds and innocence, God has compassion in the present. So let's say a person's not nice to you now. Were they ever good in their lives? Think about that. Even though they might have hurt you, was there something good that they've accomplished in their lives? Even if they didn't accomplish, if their merits had run out, we can still look at the good things they did when they were younger. This is very, very powerful. We look at people subjectively of what they do for us or not do for us. And we react based upon those subjective realities. But what if we looked at them as people in their own right who have done things in their lives which are valuable? We look at people as children, perhaps, innocent, and that's a matter of perception. How do I look at somebody that hurts me as a grown adult hurting me? Or could I have compassion? This person was once themselves a child who had value, who had attributes that were good. They were covered up through trauma, covered up through bad decisions, covered up through situations where they didn't choose to be in, that they got to this point, the point which makes me angry towards them. Then I'm only looking at one part of that person in the present, not looking at their past deeply, at their good points as well. And to conclude with tonight, if based upon the Tomer Devara, I'd like you to consider making a list of people that you still have anger towards, of people who have hurt you. And I'd like you to go through these 13 steps and try to go through them and apply all these different levels of compassion towards them. And there's a few stages. The first stage is becoming aware of who those people were, writing down the things that have hurt you, that made you angry. And then I'd like you to verbally say to yourself or write down the ways by which you forgive them. I suggest that you will find tremendous psychological benefit from even that exercise. Awareness and release. And if you have courage, I'd like you to verbally to them forgive them if they've hurt you. I'm not saying that's an easy process. but the one that benefits the most will be you. Psychologically, philosophically, religiously, you'll be Madame Lakono. You have the opportunity to be similar to your Creator. But you also psychologically will benefit if you're holding on to anger towards those who've hurt you. You'll see the benefits quickly, I believe. Psychologically, whether you're suffering from depression or anxiety or trauma, you will begin to live a much healthier life, free of that emotional, maybe physiological pain, if you're able to reach the level of the Tomer Devorah. Even work towards that, and if you have the courage, share that with people that have hurt you, and move on. Move on to something higher. Move on to your present and to your future, and not dwell primarily in the past, which often causes a lot of psychological pain and suffering.